The steam whistle's shrill cry pierced through the morning air as Penelope Whitmore felt the train shudder to a halt, and she tightened her grip on the carpetbag that held everything she owned in this world, knowing that somewhere beyond the darkness that had claimed her sight 2 years ago stood the man who had agreed to marry her sight unseen. She had been honest in her letters to Franklin Armstrong, brutally so, because deception seemed cruel when asking a stranger to bind his life to hers. The fever that had stolen her vision in Philadelphia had also taken her parents and younger brother, leaving her with nothing but the charity of distant relatives who made it clear she was a burden. When her cousin showed her the advertisement in the newspaper, reading it aloud with barely concealed eagerness to be rid of her, Penelope had swallowed her pride and composed a response. Franklin Armstrong sought a wife in Medicine Bow, Wyoming territory. The year was 1882, and men outnumbered women by staggering numbers in these frontier towns. He had been forthright in his letter, explaining that he owned a cattle ranch 15 miles outside town and needed a partner to help build a life. He was 26 years old, never married, and willing to accept her condition if she was willing to work hard and learn to navigate a new world. The correspondence had lasted 3 months, his letters arriving with increasing frequency, each one read aloud by her cousin with diminishing patience. Franklin wrote about the land, the cattle, the endless sky that stretched forever in all directions. He wrote about loneliness and hope, about wanting children someday and building something that would last. His words painted pictures her eyes could no longer see, and somewhere in those careful sentences, Penelope had found the courage to accept his proposal. Now the conductor's hand was at her elbow, guiding her down the steep steps to the platform. The August sun was hot on her face, and she could smell dust and horse manure and something else, something wild and open that Philadelphia had never possessed. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stood there, vulnerable and exposed, waiting for a voice she had never heard to claim her. Miss Whitmore. The voice was deeper than she had imagined, with a rough edge that spoke of wind and weather. Miss Penelope Whitmore from Philadelphia. Yes, she said, and hated how small her voice sounded. Are you Franklin Armstrong? I am, madam. There was a pause, and she felt his presence step closer. Your letters said you were blind, but I did not fully understand until this moment. You cannot see me at all, not since the fever, she confirmed, lifting her chin. If you have changed your mind, I understand. I have enough money for a boarding house until I can find work, perhaps as a seamstress, or changed my mind. He sounded genuinely surprised. Why would I do that? I am the one who should be worried you will take one look at me and run back to Philadelphia. I am not much to see, Miss Whitmore. Too tall, too weathered, and my nose has been broken twice. Despite her fear, Penelope felt her lips curve slightly. Then it seems we are well matched, Mr. Armstrong. I cannot see your broken nose, and you get a wife who will never criticize your appearance. She heard him laugh, a warm sound that eased some of the tension in her shoulders. I had not thought of it that way. May I take your bag? And I should tell you the wagon is about 20 feet to your left. I can describe the way, or if you are comfortable with it, I can offer my arm. It was such a small thing, asking rather than assuming, but it made her throat tight. Your arm would be helpful, thank you. His hand was large and calloused when he took hers, tucking it carefully into the crook of his elbow. She could feel the solid strength of him through the fabric of his shirt, and he smelled like leather and soap and sunshine. As they walked, he spoke quietly, describing the platform, the other passengers dispersing, the wagon ahead. There is a step up, he said when they reached it. About a foot high. The seat is wooden, not padded, I am afraid. Ranch wagon, not a fancy carriage. I do not need fancy, Penelope said. She found the step with her foot, and his hand steadied her back as she climbed up. The consideration in that touch, supporting without pushing, told her more about his character than his letters had. He settled beside her, and she heard the jingle of harness as he gathered the reins. The ride to the ranch takes about 2 hours. The road is rough in places. If you get tired, there is space behind the seat where you can lean back. I will be fine, she said. Will you tell me what you see? I like to build pictures in my mind. So he did. As the wagon rolled away from Medicine Bow, Franklin described the town with its false-fronted buildings and wide, dusty street, the saloon and the general store and the small white church on the hill. He pointed out the direction of the mountains, told her about the grasslands that stretched for miles, dotted with cattle and antelope. His voice was steady and patient, and Penelope found herself relaxing into the rhythm of his words. I should explain about the ranch, he said after a while. It is not grand. The house is simple, 4 rooms but solid. My father built it before he died 5 years back. My mother passed when I was young. I have been running it alone since then with help from 2 hired men during cattle season. There is a well with good water close to the house, a barn and a chicken coop that needs mending. Do you have chickens now? Penelope asked. 6 hens and a rooster mean as sin, Franklin said. I have been gathering my own eggs, but I will not lie, I am looking forward to passing that duty to someone else. That rooster has spurred me more times than I can count. She smiled at the image. I can gather eggs. My aunt had chickens. If you can lead me to the coop a few times, I will learn the way. You can do that. Even without seeing, I can do many things, Penelope said quietly. I am not helpless, Mr. Armstrong. I am blind, but my hands work and my mind works, and I am stronger than I look. I will not be a burden to you if you give me a chance to learn. There was silence for a moment, just the creak of the wagon and the plod of horse hooves. Then Franklin said, I never thought you would be a burden. Truth is, I was worried I would not be able to help you enough. That you would feel lost and alone out here. Will you help me learn the house, the land around it, every inch of it if you want? Then I will not be lost, she said simply. And I hope I will not be alone either. His hand found hers on the seat between them, just for a moment, a brief squeeze that conveyed more than words. No, madam, you will not be alone. I promise you that. They were married 3 days later by the pastor at that small white church Franklin had described. Penelope wore the best dress she owned, a simple blue cotton that her cousin had grudgingly packed, and Franklin wore what he said were his Sunday clothes, which meant they were clean and not covered in dust. She held a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked that morning, and when the pastor asked if she took this man to be her lawfully wedded husband, she said yes in a clear voice that did not waver. Franklin's hands were gentle when he slipped the ring on her finger, and his lips were soft and brief against hers when the pastor pronounced them man and wife. They shared a meal afterward at the boarding house, sitting with the pastor and his wife who served as witnesses, and then Franklin drove her home to the ranch that was now hers too. He had been truthful about its simplicity. As he led her through each room, describing and then guiding her hands over every surface, every piece of furniture, she built a map in her mind. The front room had a fireplace, 2 chairs, a small sofa his mother had brought from Missouri. The kitchen had a cast iron stove, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, shelves for dishes and food. One bedroom held his bed, large enough for 2, covered with quilts his mother had made. The 4th room was empty except for a trunk and some wooden crates. I thought you might want that room for something, Franklin said. A sewing room, maybe, or when children come, it could be a nursery. Whatever you need. Penelope stood in the doorway of that empty room, facing a future she could not see but was beginning to imagine. Thank you for asking what I need. Not many people do. Well, this is your home now. You should have a say in it. That night, after a simple supper of beef stew and bread, Franklin showed her the bedroom again. She could feel his nervousness, and her own heart was racing. They were strangers, legally bound, about to share intimacies that proper Philadelphia society would blush to mention. I want you to know, Franklin said slowly, that I expect nothing tonight, or any night until you are ready. I know this is strange for you, being in a new place with a man you barely know. Penelope reached out and he took her hand immediately. It is strange, she admitted, but you have been kind, Franklin, patient. I am grateful for that. You do not need to be grateful. You deserve to be treated with respect. She stepped closer until she could feel the heat of him. May I touch your face? I want to know what you look like. Of course. His voice was rough. She lifted both hands, finding his shoulders first, then his neck, then the strong line of his jaw. He had shaved recently, and his skin was smooth except for the weathering he had mentioned. Her fingers traced his cheekbones, high and prominent, then the bridge of his nose, which indeed had a slight crook in it. His lips were full, his brow broad. She explored his features slowly, building an image that was hers alone, not dependent on eyes that no longer worked. You feel like a good man, she whispered. His hands came up to cradle her face in return. You are beautiful, Penelope. I should have told you that at the train station. When you stepped off, the sun was in your hair, and I thought you were the prettiest thing I had ever seen. You do not need to say such things. I am not saying it to flatter you. I am saying it because it is true. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. And I will be saying it for the rest of our lives, so you better get used to it. They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other, and when Penelope asked him to stay, to share the bed even if they did nothing more than sleep, he did. He held her through the night, and she felt safer than she had since the fever took everything from her. The days that followed developed a rhythm. Franklin woke before dawn, and Penelope learned to wake with him. He would describe what he was doing as he dressed, and she learned where he kept his clothes in the dresser, learned the layout of the bedroom so well that she could navigate it without help. He made coffee while she dressed, and they shared breakfast at the kitchen table as the sun rose. Then the real lessons began. Franklin had infinite patience as he taught her the ranch. They started with the house, going over each room again and again until she knew where every dish, every pot, every tool belonged. He took her to the well, showed her how the bucket and rope worked, warned her about the 3 steps down from the back door that led to the yard. The chicken coop was next. True to his word, the rooster was mean, and Penelope laughed at Franklin's colorful descriptions of the bird's temperament. But she learned the location of the nesting boxes, learned to move slowly and calmly so the hens would not startle, and soon she was gathering eggs every morning on her own. See, Franklin said proudly when she came back with a basket full. I told you that rooster was the devil. You did in 5 minutes what takes me 15 because I am too busy fending off an attack. Maybe he just does not like you, Penelope teased. That bird does not like anyone, but he seems to tolerate you, which proves you have a gift. She learned to pump water to feed the horses in the barn, to hang laundry on the line Franklin strung behind the house. Each task required memorization and practice, and sometimes she made mistakes. She walked into the side of the barn once, leaving a bruise on her shoulder. She tripped over the steps she had forgotten about, skinning her knee. But Franklin never made her feel foolish. He simply helped her up, made sure she was all right, and encouraged her to try again. In the evenings, after the work was done, they sat together in the front room. Sometimes Franklin read to her from the newspaper that came weekly from Cheyenne, or from books his mother had owned. Sometimes they just talked, learning about each other in small increments. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's dream of building a cattle empire, about the loneliness after his father died, and the hired men went home each night to their own lives. She told him about Philadelphia, about her parents who had run a small bookshop, about her brother who had wanted to be a teacher. She told him about the fever, the days of delirium, waking to darkness, and the news that her family was gone. Her voice broke when she spoke of it, and Franklin pulled her close, let her cry against his chest until the grief passed. "I will be your family now," he said into her hair. "I know I cannot replace what you lost, but I will try to give you a home where you feel loved." And he did love her, she realized. It was there in every gentle touch, every patient explanation, every moment he took to make her life easier. The love had grown quietly between them, built on kindness and respect and the small intimacies of daily life. 1 month after their wedding, on a warm September evening, Penelope took his hand and led him to their bedroom. Her heart was pounding, but this was right. She knew it deep in her bones. He was her husband, and she wanted to be his wife in every way. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice hoarse. "I am sure," she said. "I want this, Franklin, I want you." He made love to her with the same patience he had shown in everything else, taking his time, making sure she was comfortable, whispering endearments against her skin. Penelope had been afraid it would hurt, that she would feel vulnerable in her darkness, but Franklin made her feel cherished instead. His hands were reverent, his kisses sweet and then passionate, and when they finally came together, it felt like a promise being fulfilled. Afterward, tangled in the quilts his mother had made, Penelope traced patterns on his chest and smiled. "I am glad I got on that train." "I am glad you answered my advertisement," Franklin replied, kissing the top of her head. "Best decision I ever made, writing that letter." "Were you scared when you saw me?" "When you realized I really could not see?" He was quiet for a moment. "Scared is not the right word. I was worried I would not be enough, that I would fail you somehow. But then you made that joke about not being able to criticize my appearance, and I thought maybe we would be all right." "We are more than all right," Penelope said softly. As autumn deepened, Penelope grew more confident in her abilities. She learned to cook on the cast iron stove, measuring ingredients by feel and memory. Franklin built her a shelf in the kitchen where everything had its specific place, and she could prepare entire meals without help. She learned to knead bread, to preserve vegetables from the garden, to make the beef stew that Franklin claimed was better than anything he had ever tasted. She also learned the land around the house. Franklin walked with her every evening, describing the landscape, letting her feel the different textures of grass and sage, warning her about gopher holes and rocks. He showed her the boundaries of the safe area, the parts she could navigate alone. It was perhaps 200 feet in any direction from the house, but within that space, she could move freely. "I wish you could see the mountains," he said one evening as they stood together watching the sunset he described in vivid detail. "They are purple and gold right now, and the sky is on fire. Paint it with your words," she said, leaning against him. "You have good eyes, Franklin. You see things deeply. When you describe them to me, I feel like I am seeing them too." "I will be your eyes from now on," he said, and it was not a burden in his voice, but a promise. "Anything you want to see, I will show you." The first snow came in November, and Franklin taught her the new sounds and sensations that came with it. The crunch under her feet, the clean, cold smell, the way the world became muffled and quiet. He described the way it covered everything in white, transforming the landscape into something magical. "Are you warm enough?" he asked constantly, piling more wood on the fire, wrapping her in shawls. "I am fine," she assured him. "Better than fine. I am happy, Franklin." He kissed her then, deep and thorough. So am I, happier than I ever thought I could be. Winter was hard on the ranch. The cattle had to be checked constantly, hay had to be distributed, water sources kept from freezing. Franklin worked long hours, often coming home exhausted and half frozen. Penelope learned to have hot food ready, to warm water for him to wash, to rub the stiffness from his shoulders. One particularly brutal January night, a blizzard hit with such force that Franklin barely made it back from checking the herd. Penelope heard him stumble through the door, heard his harsh breathing, and rushed to help him. His clothes were stiff with ice, and he was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. "We need to get you warm," she said, her hands flying over him, stripping off the frozen layers. She had built up the fire earlier, sensing the storm coming, and now she thanked God for that instinct. She wrapped him in every blanket they owned and pressed herself against him, using her own body heat to help. "Thought I was done for," he managed eventually. "Could not see 3 feet in front of my face. Only found the house because I knew to count my steps from the barn." "You are safe now," she whispered, holding him tight. "I have you." The storm lasted 3 days, trapping them inside, but Penelope did not mind. They had food, they had wood for the fire, and they had each other. They spent the time talking and making love and planning for the future. "When spring comes, I want to expand the chicken coop," Penelope said. "If we had more hens, I could sell eggs in town. That could be my contribution to the ranch." Franklin pulled her closer. "You already contribute more than you know, but if you want more chickens, we will get more chickens. Even if it means that Devil Rooster gets more hens to protect." "I will handle the rooster," she said confidently. When the storm finally broke and Franklin could get out to check on the cattle, he came back with grim news. They had lost 15 head, frozen or scattered by the wind. It was a significant loss, one that would hurt their finances. "We will manage," Penelope said firmly. "We still have the rest of the herd, and my egg money will help once spring comes." He looked at her with such love it made her breath catch, even though she could not see it. She could feel it in the air between them, hear it in his voice. "How did I ever manage without you?" "Poorly, I imagine," she said, making him laugh despite the worry. Spring did come eventually, as it always did. The snow melted, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. Franklin expanded the chicken coop as promised, and they bought 20 more hens from a farmer near town. Penelope's egg business began modestly, with Franklin taking baskets to town every week, but word spread that the eggs were fresh and the price was fair, and soon she had regular customers. "Mrs. Patterson at the general store wants to know if you would make butter too," Franklin reported after one trip to town. "Says she will buy all you can make." So Penelope learned to make butter, and then cheese, and her small enterprise grew. She loved having her own work, contributing to the ranch in a tangible way. Franklin was proud of her, praising her efforts, and together they began to save money for the future. That future announced itself one morning in early May when Penelope woke feeling ill. She barely made it outside before losing her breakfast, and Franklin was beside her immediately, holding her hair back, his voice tight with concern. "Should I fetch the doctor? Are you sick? Did you eat something bad?" "No," Penelope said, sitting back on her heels, realization dawning. "No, I think I am with child." The silence stretched for a heartbeat, then two. Then Franklin let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the chickens in their coop. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like a madman. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "If you keep spinning me, I am going to be sick again," she said, but she was laughing too. He set her down carefully, then his hands were on her face and her hair, kissing her over and over. "A baby. Our baby. Penelope, you have made me the happiest man in Wyoming territory." "I had some help with that," she pointed out. The pregnancy was easy, much to her relief. She felt tired and sick for the first few months, but Franklin hovered over her like a mother hen, making sure she rested, taking on her chores without complaint. As her belly grew, he described the changes to her, his voice full of wonder. "You are glowing," he told her, "and the baby is definitely in there. I can see you getting bigger." "I can feel myself getting bigger," she said dryly. "My dresses barely fit." "You are beautiful," he insisted. "The most beautiful thing I have ever seen." She learned to navigate the house and yard with her changing balance, and Franklin was always nearby in case she needed help. He talked to her belly every night, telling their child about the ranch, about the mountains, about the mother who was strong and brave, and could do anything she set her mind to. In November, as the first snow began to fall, Penelope went into labor. Franklin rode to town at breakneck speed to fetch the doctor and the midwife, and the next 12 hours were the longest of his life. He held Penelope's hand, wiped her forehead, whispered encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her into this condition. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, their son was born. He came into the world screaming his displeasure, and Franklin found himself crying too, overwhelmed by the sight of this tiny, perfect person. "Is he all right?" Penelope gasped. "Is he healthy?" "He is perfect," the midwife said, laying the baby on Penelope's chest. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a good strong voice. Penelope's hands explored her son's tiny face, his downy hair, his miniature fingers that gripped hers with surprising strength. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mother." "And I am your father," Franklin added, his voice breaking. "And we are going to love you more than anything in this world." They named him Peter, after Penelope's father. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, and Penelope adapted to motherhood with the same determination she had brought to learning the ranch. Franklin helped with everything, changing nappies, walking the floor when Peter fussed, describing to Penelope every detail of their son's appearance and development. "He has your eyes," Franklin told her. "Well, the shape of them, but they are blue like mine right now." "Might change," the doctor said. "And his hair?" she asked, nursing Peter in the rocking chair Franklin had bought in town. "Light brown like yours, and a lot of it. He looked like a little old man when he was born, but he is getting cuter every day." Life found a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Penelope's egg and butter business continued, with Franklin helping more now that her hands were often full with Peter. The ranch was doing better too. They had not lost any cattle in the winter, and the spring calves were healthy. Money was still tight, but they were managing. When Peter was 6 months old and starting to sit up on his own, Penelope and Franklin sat together one evening after the baby was asleep. "I never imagined this," Penelope said softly. "When I got on that train, I was so scared. I thought I was going to a life of duty and obligation at best. I never thought I would find love." "I never thought I would find someone like you," Franklin said. "Someone who sees me for who I really am, even without eyes. Someone who makes this house a home. We have built a good life, have we not? The best life." He kissed her temple. "And it is only going to get better." He was right. As Peter grew from baby to toddler, the ranch prospered. Franklin hired a permanent hand, a young man named Tom, who proved reliable and hardworking. With Tom's help, Franklin could expand the herd, and Penelope's business grew too. She now had 50 chickens, 2 cows for milk and butter, and a reputation in town for quality products. Peter was a curious child, fearless and energetic. Penelope learned to follow him by sound, her ears tracking his movements as he explored. Franklin built a fence around the yard so Peter could play safely, and he described everything to Penelope so she could picture her son's adventures. "He is trying to climb the fence," Franklin reported one afternoon. Made it 2 rungs up before he thought better of it. Now he is chasing a butterfly. Well, waddling after a butterfly. He has your determination, that is for certain. When Peter was 3, he began to understand that his mother was different from other mothers. One day he asked, in that blunt way children have, "Mama, why do your eyes not work?" Penelope knelt down to his level. "I had a sickness when I was younger and it hurt my eyes. But my ears work very well and my hands do too. I can hear you even when you are trying to sneak cookies from the jar. Papa says you are special. Your papa says nice things about me. He says you can do anything, even without eyes." Penelope felt tears prick behind her useless eyes. "Your papa is a very good man." Peter hugged her tight. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, sweetheart, more than all the stars in the sky." "How many stars are there?" Peter asked, because he was 3 and everything was a question. "Hundreds and hundreds," Penelope said. "Papa will show them to you tonight if it is clear." And Franklin did, taking Peter outside after supper and pointing out constellations, telling stories about each one. Penelope sat on the porch, listening to her husband and son, and felt such contentment it almost hurt. The next few years passed in a blur of growth and change. The ranch continued to expand, and Franklin hired another hand. They built a larger barn and a proper smokehouse. Penelope's business had grown so much that she now had a standing order with 3 stores in Medicine Bow and 2 in nearby towns. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Peter started school in town when he turned 6, riding in with Franklin 3 days a week. He was bright and eager to learn, and he came home full of stories about his teacher and the other children. He was protective of his mother, Franklin reported, quick to defend her if anyone suggested her blindness was a weakness. One of the older boys said something stupid, Franklin told her one evening, and Peter punched him in the nose. He did what? Penelope was torn between horror and pride. "I had a talk with him about using words instead of fists," Franklin said, "but I also told him I understood why he did it. Nobody talks bad about his mama. He cannot go around punching people, Franklin. I know. And he knows now too, but I was a little proud of him, I will not lie." When Peter was 7, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first, perhaps because she was older now, or because she was chasing after an active boy while also running her business. But Franklin was there every step of the way, and so was Peter, who was excited about becoming a big brother. "Is it a boy or a girl?" Peter asked constantly. "We will not know until the baby arrives," Penelope explained for the 100th time. "I hope it is a boy. We can play together." "And if it is a girl," Peter considered this, "then I will teach her things, like Papa teaches me." Their daughter was born on a beautiful spring morning, arriving so quickly that the midwife barely made it in time. She was smaller than Peter had been, with a lusty cry that announced her presence. "Another perfect baby," Franklin said, his voice choked with emotion. "Penelope, she is beautiful. She has dark hair, and I think she is going to have your face." "Let me hold her," Penelope said, and Franklin placed their daughter in her arms. Peter climbed up on the bed, careful not to jostle his mother. "Can I see her?" "Of course," Penelope said. "Come meet your sister." They named her Margaret after Franklin's mother. From the start, she was different from Peter. Where he had been easy and content, she was fussy and particular. She only wanted Penelope, crying if anyone else held her for long, and she seemed to sleep only when she felt like it, which was rarely. "She is going to be trouble," Franklin said fondly, walking the floor with her at 2 in the morning while Penelope dozed in exhaustion. But the good kind of trouble. Peter adored his sister, even when she pulled his hair or knocked over his carefully built block towers. He would sit beside her and tell her stories, his voice taking on the same patient tone Franklin used when describing things to Penelope. "She is looking at me, Mama," Peter reported. "Her eyes are open and she is really looking." "What color are they?" Penelope asked. "Brown, I think, like yours." As Margaret grew, it became clear that she had inherited her mother's strong will and her father's stubbornness. She was into everything, fearless and curious, keeping Penelope constantly on her toes. But she was also affectionate, generous with hugs and kisses, and she loved to sing in a high, slightly off-key voice that made everyone smile. The ranch continued to thrive. Franklin now had 4 permanent hands, and the herd had grown to over 500 head. They built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper parlor. Penelope's business had expanded to include preserves and pickles, and she now employed 2 women from town to help with production. Life was full and rich and busy. Some days Penelope fell into bed exhausted, barely able to move, but she had never been happier. She had a husband who loved her deeply, children who filled her days with joy, and work that gave her purpose. The blindness that had once seemed like the end of her life had become simply a part of who she was, no more defining than the color of her hair. One evening, when Peter was 12 and Margaret was 5, the family sat together on the porch after supper. It was summer, warm and pleasant, and Franklin was describing the sunset as he had done countless times over the years. "The sky is pink and orange," he said. "And the clouds look like they are on fire. The mountains are purple and there is a hawk circling over the south pasture." "I see it," Peter said, "way up high." "I cannot see it," Margaret complained. "Where is it, Papa?" "Look where I am pointing, sweetheart. See, right there." Penelope listened to her family, felt the warm breeze on her face, smelled the sage and grass and the faint scent of the cattle on the wind. This was her life, full and complete, and she would not change a single thing about it. "What are you thinking?" Franklin asked softly. He always knew when her mind was wandering. "I am thinking about that day at the train station," she said. "When you promised to be my eyes. You have kept that promise, Franklin, every single day for 13 years. It was an easy promise to keep. You make it easy to love you. I love you too." "So much." Peter made a gagging noise. "They are getting mushy again." "Papa loves Mama," Margaret said matter-of-factly. "That is good." "Yeah, I guess," Peter said, but he was smiling. The years continued their march forward. Peter grew tall and strong like his father, taking on more responsibility at the ranch. He was good with cattle, patient with horses, and respectful with the hired hands. He talked about taking over the ranch someday, and Franklin glowed with pride. Margaret was more interested in her mother's business. She learned to gather eggs, to churn butter, and as she got older, to make the preserves and pickles that had become Penelope's specialty. She had a gift for flavors, experimenting with combinations that Penelope had never considered, and soon she had created her own line of products that sold even better than her mother's. "She has your mind for business," Franklin told Penelope, "and your determination. I pity any man who tries to court her when she is older." "She is only 10, Penelope laughed. "I know, but it will be here before we know it. They grow up too fast." He was right. Peter turned 18 and took on even more responsibility at the ranch. He was a man now, capable and confident, and Franklin relied on him more and more. Margaret was 13, taller than her mother, with ideas and opinions about everything. The ranch had become one of the most successful in the county. Franklin now employed 10 men, and they had branched out into horse breeding as well as cattle. The house had been expanded again, and Penelope's business was a full operation, with a dedicated building and 6 employees. They were not the young couple who had met at the train station anymore. Franklin was 44 with silver threading through his dark hair. Penelope was 42, and though she could not see the lines on her face, she could feel them when she washed. But they were still in love, still partners in every sense of the word. One night, lying in bed after the house had gone quiet, Franklin took her hand and said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" "About everything we have built. This ranch, our family, your business. It is more than I ever dreamed of when I wrote that advertisement. Are you happy?" Penelope asked, hearing something in his voice. "Happier than any man deserves to be, but I want to make sure you are happy too. Really happy, not just content." Penelope rolled to face him, her hand finding his face in the darkness that was all she knew. "Franklin Armstrong, I am so happy I can barely contain it. You gave me a life when I thought my life was over. You gave me love and children and purpose. How could I be anything but happy? I worry sometimes that it is too much. The ranch, the children, your business. That you are working too hard. I like working hard, I like having purpose, and I like doing it all with you." He kissed her palm. "I love you, Penelope, more now than on our wedding day, and I loved you plenty then. I love you too, always." Another 5 years passed, bringing new changes and new blessings. Peter, at 23, married a girl from town named Sarah. She was kind and hardworking, and she won Penelope's approval immediately by not treating her any differently because of her blindness. They built a house on the ranch, not far from the main house, and Peter took over most of the daily operations. Margaret, at 18, showed no interest in marriage. She was too busy running the business, which she had officially taken over from Penelope. Under her management, it had expanded to supplying stores in Cheyenne and even as far as Denver. She was fierce and focused, and Penelope could not have been prouder. Franklin and Penelope found themselves with more time together as their children took on the work they had once done. They spent long evenings on the porch, talking and planning and simply enjoying each other's company. Franklin's hair was fully silver now, and he moved a bit slower than he used to, but he was still strong and capable. "We are getting old," Penelope said one day, her fingers in his hair. "Speak for yourself. I am in my prime," she laughed. "Your prime was 20 years ago. My prime is right now, with you beside me and our children thriving and grandchildren on the way." Grandchildren did come. Peter and Sarah had their first child, a boy they named Franklin after his grandfather, and watching Franklin hold his grandson for the first time made Penelope cry. Peter described it to her in detail later, how gently his father had held the baby, how tears had run down his weathered face. He said he wished Grandma Margaret could have seen this, Peter told her. And then he said that you were the best mother and grandmother anyone could ask for. More grandchildren followed. Peter and Sarah had 3 boys in quick succession, and the ranch rang with the sound of children playing again. Margaret eventually married a banker from Cheyenne, a quiet man named Robert who adored her and supported her business ambitions. They had twin girls who inherited their mother's determination and their grandmother's sharp mind. Franklin and Penelope settled into the role of grandparents with joy. They were slower now in their 60s, but they were still active. Franklin still rode out to check the cattle, though Peter did most of the work. Penelope still made some batches of preserves, though Margaret ran the business. They were content to let the next generation take the lead while they enjoyed the fruits of their labor. One autumn evening, 38 years after Penelope had stepped off that train, they sat together on the porch they had sat on countless times before. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, supervised by their parents, and the sun was setting over the mountains. "Describe it to me," Penelope said, as she always did. "The sky is orange and gold," Franklin said, his voice rougher with age but still warm. "The mountains are purple and there is snow on the peaks already. The aspens are turning yellow and the grass is brown. Our grandchildren are playing tag and little Franklin just tackled his brother. Sarah is telling them to be gentle. Margaret and Robert are sitting on the steps of their house, watching the girls play with the kittens from the barn. "It sounds perfect," Penelope said. "It is perfect." "You have given me a perfect life, Penelope." "We gave each other a perfect life," she corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you." "I will be your eyes from now on," Franklin said, repeating the promise he had made almost 4 decades ago. "For as long as I live, I will show you the world. I know you will. You always keep your promises." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, surrounded by the evidence of their love and hard work. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and thriving. Their children and grandchildren were healthy and happy. They had built something that would last long after they were gone. "You remember being scared?" Franklin asked. "That day at the train station. Terrified," Penelope admitted. "I thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life. And instead I made the best decision of my life. I found you. I found home." Franklin lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I found home too. In you." As the sun set and the stars began to appear, their family gathered around them. Peter and Sarah brought the boys over to say goodnight. Margaret and Robert came with the girls. They stood together, 3 generations, bound by love and blood and the legacy of 2 people who had taken a chance on each other. "Tell us the story, Grandma," little Franklin begged. "About when you met Grandpa," Penelope smiled. "You have heard that story 100 times. Tell us again," the twins chorused. So she did. She told them about the train and the fear and the man who promised to be her eyes. She told them about learning the ranch, about the mean rooster, about falling in love slowly and surely. She told them about their grandfather's patience and kindness, about building a life together one day at a time. The children listened, rapt, even though they knew every word. It was their favorite story, the foundation of their family, and they never tired of hearing it. When she finished, Franklin added his own ending, as he always did. "And your grandmother was the bravest person I ever met. She came to a strange place to marry a strange man, and she built an empire. She showed me that strength is not about what you can see, but about how you face what life gives you." "Grandpa is getting mushy again," one of the boys whispered, making everyone laugh. "I am allowed to be mushy about your grandmother," Franklin said with dignity. "I have been mushy about her for almost 40 years, and I am not stopping now." Later, after the children had been taken home and the house was quiet, Penelope and Franklin lay in the bed they had shared for decades. "Thank you," Penelope said quietly. "For what?" "For being exactly who you are. For loving me, for giving me this beautiful life. I should be thanking you. You took a chance on a lonely rancher and made all his dreams come true. We made each other's dreams come true." "Yes," Franklin agreed. "We did." They drifted off to sleep holding each other, as they had every night for 38 years. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass, and the stars shone down on the ranch they had built, on the family they had created, on the love that had sustained them through every challenge and triumph. The years continued, gentler now. Franklin and Penelope moved through their 70s, their bodies slower but their hearts still full. They were great-grandparents now, with Peter's oldest son married and starting his own family. The ranch was in its 3rd generation, stronger than ever, and Margaret's business had become a regional empire. They had built something that would last, something that would outlive them. But more than that, they had built a love that had stood the test of time, that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. They had proved that 2 strangers could become soulmates, that love could grow in the most unlikely soil, that faith and patience and kindness could create miracles. One spring morning, When Penelope was 78 and Franklin was 80, they sat together on the porch and watched the sunrise Franklin described in the familiar, beloved words he had used for 43 years. "I have been thinking," Penelope said. "About what?" "About how lucky I am. How blessed." "We are both blessed," Franklin said, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. "I was blind and alone and scared, and you gave me everything. You gave me eyes to see the world even if they were not my own. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. You gave me love." "You gave me all those things too," Franklin said. "I was alone on this ranch going through the motions of living but not really alive. And then you came and everything changed. You made me better. You made me want to be better." "We made each other better," Penelope said, and it was true. They sat together as the sun rose higher, warming their faces, their hands clasped together like they had been for more than 4 decades. Around them, the ranch woke up, with the sounds of cattle and horses and people starting their day. Their family was all around them, living and working and loving on the land they had built together. It was not the life Penelope had imagined when she was a young woman in Philadelphia. It was not the life Franklin had expected when he placed that advertisement looking for a wife. But it was their life, built together, day by day, challenge by challenge, triumph by triumph. And it was perfect when they eventually passed, years later within months of each other. Their family mourned but also celebrated. They celebrated a love that had lasted over 50 years, a partnership that had built a legacy, 2 lives that had been made complete by finding each other. They told the story to the next generation, and the next, about the blind mail-order bride who stepped off the train and the cowboy who promised to be her eyes, and how together they had created something beautiful and lasting. Their graves were side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with the mountains in the distance and the endless Wyoming sky above. The headstones bore their names and dates, but also words that summed up their love. Together they saw clearly. The ranch continued, generation after generation, built on the foundation of love and hard work and determination that Franklin and Penelope had established. Their story became legend in the family, the gold standard by which all relationships were measured. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, their descendants swore they could feel their presence on the porch, sitting together, holding hands, watching a sunset described in words that only they could hear. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, forged in adversity, strengthened by time. It was proof that the best journeys sometimes begin with fear, that the greatest loves sometimes start with strangers, and that seeing clearly has nothing to do with eyes and everything to do with heart. Franklin and Penelope Armstrong had seen each other clearly from the very beginning, and that clarity had given them everything they could ever want or need. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the successful ranch and thriving business, in the values they had instilled, and the example they had set. But more than anything, their legacy lived on in the story of a blind woman who took a chance on hope and a lonely cowboy who promised to show her the world, and how together they had built a life more beautiful than any sunset, more lasting than any monument, more precious than any treasure. And somewhere in the eternal span of time, they were still together, still holding hands, still in love, proving that the best love stories never really end.